We begin with a measurable fact in America right now. Things are not okay. Troops in the streets, federal agents killing in broad daylight, President Trump openly defying laws, DOJ abusing powers against his enemies list as Trump pockets hundreds of millions, stoking questions about whether he's acting for the public, himself, or some purchased foreign agenda. This is the State of the Union as the U.S. marks over 1 year since Trump was sworn back in. This is a time to assess the president's policies in a typical era. But this is no typical era. So tonight, our special report is on how America's bedrock guardrails are holding up. First, in government and among the wider public. How the government checks are doing and how the American people are meeting the challenge. Now, Trump's rushed, rule-busting governing can actually overwhelm the system, making it harder to even see what's happening over this past year or where his plots worked or failed. So this new report tracks each key guardrail. And I'm going to walk you through this. Some guardrails are holding up, marked green, like lawsuits. Some are a mixed bag, a mixed record, like how we can measure the police military complex trying to patrol us at home. That's yellow, for example, and others are failing, like the DOJ, clearly marked red. Now, for our democracy, if you see the glass half empty, you'll notice some of the red. Others may find encouragement in the green. But I want to share one more truth before we dig into this special report tonight. Donald Trump tries to scramble any limits on power with spectacle, shock, and awe, a playbook to instill fear or hopelessness or both, so that giving in is pitched as some sort of inevitable next step. Reality actually shows the opposite, people standing up, fighting and winning even against lying, cheating, violence, and that convicted sedition, and against a political figure who, remember, got fewer votes in 2 of his 3 elections, lost the midterms last time, loses in the courts a lot, and was the first president ever indicted, along with 8 of his aides getting convicted.
President Trump acknowledging that Joe Biden will be president.
For the first time in U.S. history, a former president is facing federal criminal charges.
But did not take responsibility for the mob of his supporters who breached the Capitol.
President Trump taking the oath of office for the second time in the Capitol Rotunda.
More than 1,500 pardons or commutations in all for the people who violently stormed the U.S. Capitol.
President Trump says nearly every federal agency in the U.S. government could fall under the scrutiny of Elon Musk.
Jimmy Kimmel back on air overnight.
The hard work of improving New Yorkers' lives starts now.
This is the most American thing that you can do. Protest and speak for what you believe in.
Those are the stakes. Our report now begins with government guardrails. The founders were most concerned that the new democracy could be hijacked by a wannabe king. And they made checks inside the executive, staff bound by the Constitution, not a politician's whims. Officials must resist orders that break the law. And the epicenter for that is DOJ, which did patrol Trump in his first term, even appointing special counsel Mueller because Trump's team could not investigate itself. Now the DOJ is failing that independence this term. Some officials have resisted orders to lie in court or abuse power against Trump's enemies, even resigning, but the line hasn't held. Trump's former personal lawyers, Bondi and Blanche, run the DOJ like Trump's political machine, probing rivals in cases so weak, several dropped long before trial. New plots against the Fed chair this month, new probes of Minnesota Democrats added to this chart breaking today, and even 1 or 2 questionable cases of illegal selective prosecution. That's bad. But right now, it's 14 such cases. The very enemies list Bondi disclaimed under oath. So our reporting finds the DOJ's internal guardrail is failing, the red you see here. Trump doing in 1 year this term what he never did in his first 4 years, breaking the DOJ into an unlawful arm of his agenda. And as Russia and countless autocracies show, if the government can get away with indicting anyone for nothing, then you don't have a full opposition or a full democracy. Then there's the use of soldiers and militarized policing on American soil. Trump seizing National Guards without their governors, deploying ICE agents in places that voted against him, leading to escalation, to violence, and the ICE agent killing Renee Good. Now, judges have slowly trimmed some of those deployments. But remember, the founders devoted the Third Amendment to stop soldiers from being forced onto citizens. Federal law bars the military from policing at home. And yet the military has been deployed in 6 cities and counting. This guardrail is clearly faltering, and Trump's floating even broader emergency powers, or the Insurrection Act. Now, the courts are the ultimate authority in our system. They limit politicians' power. They resolve what the law says. They're the last word on elections. And I want to show you, if you really measure it, the court's record this past year is mixed. They've tangled with DOJ lawyers. They've clearly ruled against some of Trump's lawless moves. We count about 13 major rulings against him. But the Supreme Court has also allowed, even rewarded, Trump ploys to evade the law or run out the clock. And so that's a measure there. Then you have something we all remember. Judges are just on the receiving end. But the doors to the courthouse right now are still open and working. There's been a flood of lawsuits against Trump actions in year 1. And if you count up and actually look at this, something he may want to distract you from, about half have won steps to slow or block unlawful acts, with many still pending. Those 358 major suits are seen across the country, part of the many losses Trump has been dealt this first year. In fact, so many losses, it's hard to remember them all.
We removed the public safety threat, gang member, designated terrorist.
The Supreme Court says the Trump administration must facilitate the return of a Maryland man deported to a Salvadorian prison.
The government admitted it mistakenly deported him.
Elon Musk's time in the White House has officially come to an end.
This feels like a reality show character being kind of slowly written off.
I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way.
Jimmy Kimmel back on air overnight.
Anyway, as I was saying before I was interrupted.
This is not partisan. We're asking for you to stand with us now to release all of the files.
It's never been political for us.
2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed.
Donald Trump put his surrender and humiliation in writing in capital letters in a tweet saying, "I have just signed the bill to release the Epstein files."
There is no legal, factual, or moral justification for President Trump to deploy any military troops or National Guard units here in Chicago.
The Supreme Court blocked the Trump administration from deploying the National Guard in Illinois.
A lot of those losses from the lawsuits. That guardrail is working. Now, the founders also predicted that ambition would check ambition. And this isn't one you even need a chart for. That has not been the case in this Republican Congress. Infamously meek. Republicans don't even defend their own elected congressional power, let alone checking the president for seizing tariff and foreign policy powers or doing anything about one of the biggest stories of this past year, his corrupt and dangerous grifting, which breaks the Constitution's ban on foreign gifts, taking a jet from a foreign country, hundreds of millions in crypto. It dwarfs all White House corruption scandals. And so as we mark this year in the guardrails, let's be clear, it's one of the greatest violations of U.S. government guardrails ever.
His family's expanding business interests in the Middle East are facing fresh scrutiny.
Blurring the lines between business and government.
The Trump organization has plans for luxury skyscrapers, golf courses, and a deal involving cryptocurrency.
My goodness me. $5 billion?
Eye-popping numbers.
President Trump preparing to accept a luxury jet from the royal family of Qatar.
The jet is just the latest in a series of actions taken by the president that flout ethics norms.
It's crypto-friendly legislation coming from the President of the United States, who is in turn cashing in on the crypto phase. Personally, his family.
The single largest corrupt gift in the history of gifts.
Facts. Patrolling a president's self-enrichment and violating the Constitution, that's up to Congress. And Republicans have completely failed. They didn't even join a plan to just block your taxpayer dollars from being used to upgrade what is now Donald Trump's personal jet gift. It's one of several examples where the GOP Congress just fails as a guardrail. By contrast, many states are stepping up. They're using their powers to resist those deployments. They take the administration to court in legal ways that not everyone can do. They're using state mechanisms. In fact, we count 23 major suits from the states. This is the Constitution's federalism. this guardrail is working, and states also protect elections. And that brings us, of course, to the people's checks on Trump, which is actually an area very interesting that, according to the numbers, is working better. Now, we documented government checks and balances, many faltering that you see in red and yellow. Now we turn to the other check provided under the Constitution, the American people's rights, where free speech, protests, and democracy are holding up better, including with the work by citizens as opposed to many elites, with one exception. CEOs have an outsized role in economics, media, and democracy. They can use their power to hold the line. We see that in wartime patriotism or peacetime government collaboration, and sometimes in backing civil rights and democracy. Some CEOs responded to the original January 6th attack by denouncing it and vowing not to donate to politicians involved. Once Trump came back, though, many reversed themselves, donating to him. This includes some of America's largest company CEOs, and the backtracking contrast is striking.
Mark Zuckerberg just writing in a statement that the shocking events of the last 24 hours clearly demonstrate that President Donald Trump intends to use his remaining time in office to undermine the peaceful and lawful transition of power.
Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon said, "For years, our democracy has built a reservoir of goodwill around the world that brings important benefits for our citizens. Today's attack on the U.S. Capitol does further damage."
Indeed, those big companies, 12 of their CEOs were once standing up to this. We showed you some of that sound. Now they're actively undercutting the red line they claimed for democracy. Other CEOs have buckled under government pressure to suspend Jimmy Kimmel or pay Trump for baseless cases that attack speech. This includes CEOs who, as part of their portfolio, also oversee news companies. And then there are the lawyers. Trump plotted against the Sixth Amendment right to counsel by retaliating against firms representing his critics. Now, law firms fight in court for a living, yet early on, many buckled under that plot. About 38% of the targeted firms have been fighting back over time in court, a mixed picture at best. Now, Trump also tried abusing government funding to attack campus freedom. And while many people criticize the universities which buckled, and that got a lot of attention, when you look over the year, our reporting finds most targeted universities, about 60%, just there, about 57%, are fighting back. Now, some of the parent companies' CEOs buckled. I mentioned that. But when you look at the actual editors of newspapers, say the Times, Wall Street Journal, and most working journalists, they're not buckling, even as Trump sues and tries to bar access, and recently even oversaw the unusual federal search of a reporter's home. Journalists are still reporting and speaking and critiquing the government as the Constitution envisioned. In fact, if you just think about it, a lot of what we know about Trump attacking the Bill of Rights comes from the exercise of that very first right, the First Amendment right to report and speak. It bars the government, of course, from any attempt to censor, ban, or punish free speech, free press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble, which brings us to protest. Americans have been exercising that right to great effect, breaking records for protests in this past year against Trump's autocratic bid for king-like powers, really sparking a movement that is now, according to polling, 13% larger than MAGA.
Protest now or bow down later.
Those are your options?
Yes.
Everything this regime has been up to is anti-American.
More than 100 community members rally around a Vermont man at risk of deportation.
Like I say, this is where I belong. This is home to me.
Congress makes the laws, not the president.
I believe in the Constitution, the rule of law, and I believe in people treating other people with humanity.
I didn't think that our government would be inhumane like that.
It is regular Americans who have been fighting against Trump all over the country. Yes, in Washington, but honestly, all over the country. And that's what's made the difference.
These protests all over the country are one of the most effective green ratings when you measure the guardrails of this past year. Comparison, the conservative Tea Party got a lot of attention and drew about 700,000 attendees concerned about Obama's leadership across 2009. The past year's Trump protests have drawn about 13 million people, a massive show of public resistance and unity. And that can shape public opinion and impact politicians alike. Now, I told you DOJ employees falling down on their constitutional oath. We reported that. The U.S. guardrails also require regular citizens at the beginning and the end of every major prosecution. The grand juries that charge, and of course, the jury of 12 that convicts. And so the DOJ's extreme cases are sometimes dead on arrival because citizens on grand juries keep rejecting cases against protesters, against some Trump rivals. They've stopped now, if you're counting, 10 attempted cases that we know about from Bondi's DOJ, including the bungled case against New York Attorney General James. Then there are elections. Trump now muses about an illegal third term or plotting against the midterms. Those are threats to do crime. They got to be taken seriously, especially after his convicted 2020 insurrection. But the fact is, this year, elections were still successfully held around the nation. That is another green rating. Democracy's core guardrail, the people decide, is holding under strain. So, altogether, it is a rough year for the rule of law. We're seeing red on the government side. Trump, the source of the attacks on the rule of law, his appointees, Congress, all failing the Constitution. That's as courts and states try to hold the line. But the evidence shows the public is leading in this breach, and you can measure it. Regular workers showing courage their bosses lack, journalists reporting amid these attacks, citizens defending a Constitution that the DOJ is clearly trashing, from the jury box to the ballot box, and those record-breaking protests month after month, even against very real threats of government retribution or violence as soldiers roam the streets. And this is actually what the founders envisioned. Strong checks and rights, because they expected conniving tyrants can come into power. The rights protected because we will need them, not because everything's just going to be easy or okay. Things are not okay. The rule of law is losing key rounds. The founders planned for that. Madison was fixated on how to systematically thwart future tyrants who might come into office. Or as the late Bashar Jackson said, a.k.a. Pop Smoke, drop a slip and get a light pack. I don't care if you're losing. Still fight back. The people are fighting back. And that's partly because we still have that power because the guardrails are protecting it most of the time. And the American system makes it a stronger power than any temporary politician who's supposed to serve the public.